Hosting for the Dice Tower is generously provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff, in stock at coolstuffinc.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 452.
Power creep, 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 creep.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, we have a whole mess of contributions. We'll look at tile-laying games, give you the biography of Qwirkle, play some card sharks, figure out why you're cheating, try not to go too far when drawing people into the hobby, and more. Plus, we have tales of amazement, humor, and romance, and we look at power creep. Which games are the biggest offenders, and which solve the problem in novel ways? I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the Zordon to my Alpha 5, Tom Vassell.
Zordon and Alpha 5, these sound like aliens from Space Invaders?
The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, yes. Alpha 5's the little robot who helps out the Power Rangers.
Why?
Message from Zordon!
But why do we have a Power Rangers reference?
Because it's power creep. And I was thinking, like, the putty things from Power Rangers, they're sort of creepy. Power. Go, Power Rangers.
I don't believe I've ever watched a whole episode of Power Rangers. I believe I watched part of one, and I was like, how could a show be this dumb?
Yeah, my little brother watched a lot of it. They're rebooting it. There's going to be a movie coming in, I think, next year.
Well, that's not a awful thing.
Yeah.
For people who like it. Anyhow, okay, folks, my name's Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And
why'd we speed up?
We're here to talk to, I don't know, because I felt like we were dragging there.
Ah.
So let's get going. We're going to start by talking about board games, as always. First, we're going to start out with a brand new game, which is just going to backers from the Kickstarter campaign, and that's Millennium Blades.
Ooh, I want to hear about this.
This is a level 99 game, which is essentially about playing a collectible card game. It's kind of funky. In this game, you buy packs of booster cards and open them up to see what's inside, and then build a deck out of those, and you trade and sell these cards on a market. So there's like a small economic part to this game, and then you actually play your decks against each other. Now, the game is split up into 3 tournaments, although, honestly, I thought, after playing the second tournament, I was like, that's pretty good. I don't know why they needed 3, but whatever. The tournament is basically everyone is going to pick a card from their hand and play it, and you play these cards in front of you, and they will give you a certain amount of points, and whoever has the most points wins the tournament. But cards will give you points if they're still around at the end of the game, and other cards will make you flip cards face down. Some cards will get points depending on the order you play them in. It's not a very complex game, but it's good enough for this instance. It's good enough that once you play it, when you're drafting the cards, you're like, oh, that would be a good one. The cards have different rarities, and it's funny because the card backs look like a pack of booster cards, but when you buy one and you flip it over just one card, that's because you throw out the rest of the cards in a pack.
Nice.
You only keep the rarest card. You know that.
Right.
Now, this being a level 99 game means that they believe when you buy a game, you also buy a company or whatever, because they throw in the kitchen sink. There's always a gazillion things, and this one is no exception. However, in this one, I'm really glad they did, because you will play with a lot of the game. And the game has a lot of the tropes from CCGs, but it actually felt like I'm sitting there going, I need one more card. All right, fine, I'll buy another booster pack. All right, I'll buy another booster pack. And I'm running out of money just like real life.
Okay.
And then you could trade people. Like, I got a card here. Come on, someone wants this card. Please, I need money so I can buy more boosters. It just was an entertaining style of game. I enjoyed both the economic half and the card playing half, and I felt that they broke each other up nicely. Like, I'm getting tired of this part. Oh, it's time for the other part. And you also have you're also building a collection of cards that you're not going to play with these cards. you're actually going to discard them. But it's like a collection that gets you a lot of points. These are cards we just look at. We don't play with them.
Nice.
So it captured a lot of the silliness in the game, but the game itself is a pretty solid game. Thumbs up for me, Millennium Blades.
Cool. I really liked the packs of paper money. Like they're stickered so that it's still paper money.
I'm not sure how I feel about those, Eric.
Yeah?
Because I have such an abominable hatred for paper money.
Yeah.
But the packs of money didn't bother me that much. And that bothers me that it didn't bother me.
Although what's weird is that it's a wrapped pack of like 7 $1 bills that in game terms is a $1 bill.
Yeah, but it's supposed to act as you throwing around fat stacks of cash.
Right. Yes.
I like it. I don't know. Why do I like it so much? It's just I don't know.
You're torn over your dislike of paper money and your connection to this particular implementation.
It's like a movie genre I hate, but my favorite actor's in it.
First up for me is Thunderbirds. This is the Matt Leacock cooperative game based on the television show that I never really watched. This was one of those puppet animation adventure series, and this is based on that. And the guys I was playing with were both like super excited about the theme. And I was like, yeah, I don't even know who the Lady Penelope, I don't know who that is. Anyway, you are the Thunderbirds, and there are various vehicles that are associated with these guys. You've got little color-coded pegs. It's kind of like the game of life, but these vehicles have little spaces for the peg people to go in. And you may have the same color vehicle, but you don't necessarily need to be driving that vehicle as you go around and do stuff. Each of these vehicles has strengths and weaknesses. Some move faster than others. One is like a cargo container that can carry things around. One can travel in between space and back to the main island. There's also a space station that doesn't go anywhere, but there's stuff you can do on the space station. There are various locations all around on Earth, and there's also space locations. And you are trying to eliminate threats and ultimately thwart the evil plot of the evil villain. There's like a row of cards up at the top, and these are randomly determined. You've got different levels of threats. And for the basic game, we had like level 1 threat, and then a level 2 threat, and then a level 4 threat. And there's other like event cards that space these things out. The first threat, which is maybe 3 or 4 event cards away from the beginning of the track, gets flipped up. And you have to complete that particular threat, which is maybe discarding certain tokens or achieving some sort of goal. You have to complete that before the little nasty bad guy token gets there, because if you don't, you lose. And that nasty bad guy token is going to move based on die rolls. You could have him move along that way. Some card effects are going to move him. And anytime that guy gets to an event card, the end of an event card, you have to flip that up and something bad will happen. But if it gets to the threat and you have not completed that threat, you lose. If, however, you manage to complete all of the threat cards, mitigate all of those threats, discard the proper tokens before the bad guy token gets all the way to the end, you win. You do this by hopping in all the various vehicles and trying to mitigate the threats that appear all over the board. It feels a little bit like Pandemic, but not too much so. I've seen a lot of criticism that it's just too much like Pandemic. I didn't really see that. However, because these vehicles are shuttling you around, it's possible for you to get stranded in certain areas. Like I was the guy that sat up in the space station, and somebody took the shuttle that can travel between the space station and Earth and left. And I was stuck on the space station with nothing to do.
That seems like really poor planning, though.
Yes. We didn't do that for the second game, and when we managed to win that one. So don't do that. So it's possible that you can really mess things up just in logistics. It is fun to fly these different vehicles around and use the submarine or use the cargo container, pick up technology and drop it off in different places to achieve objectives. It was fun. I don't know if it's one that I need to seek out. I mean, there's lots of co-ops in my library. I think if you are a fan of Thunderbirds, absolutely check this game out because I think it does embrace the theme very well. But if you have other Matt Leacock designs, I don't know if this replaces any of them. It's a nice, strong theme. I enjoyed it, but it's not going to replace, say, Pandemic for me. But that was Thunderbirds. I liked it.
Yeah. I think what you're saying reflects what I thought about it. I guess my biggest problem with it, as I keep thinking about it, is just that there's a lot of times where you simply didn't have anything to do on your turn.
Well, and certainly when I got stranded on the space station, that was the case.
Well, that's actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right. Let me talk about another Matt Leacock game since we're on this thread, and that's Knit-Wit. Now, Knit-Wit is a party-style game. It's a party game.
Yeah.
And it has these spools that you're going to be placing on a table and then putting these pieces of yarn with clothespins on around these spools. And basically, you're creating a Venn diagram. So if a spool is in between a red, blue, and green thread, and the red thread says big, and the blue thread says dangerous, and the green one says shiny, everyone's going to write on their paper something that's whatever those three words are I just said.
Big, dangerous, and shiny?
Big, dangerous, and shiny. And you can write what you want.
A giant ball of tinfoil.
Okay, giant ball of tinfoil, Eric writes. So it's like categories. Once all the different thimbles are out there, not thimbles, spools of thread are out there. Each one is numbered, and each one is in a mixture. It's in at least one of these rings of yarn, but it might be a more, and the more it is, the harder it is to think of something. You write them down. You reveal your answers. If your answer is the same as someone else, you cross it off. If it's not, you get points for the number of rings that it's inside, unless, of course, everyone votes your answer down, in which case you get no points. And whoever has the most points wins the game. It's a single round game, which kind of threw me off because I was like, all right, that's round one, right? Nope, that was the game.
That was it.
The game could literally take 10 minutes.
Okay.
So it's a riff on categories, right? It's like a categories if you throw a Venn diagram in. I don't know. It's fine. I enjoy it, but it's not really spectacular. There's a couple problems. One is that whole judging thing. Since you get nailed for having the same thing someone else has, you will then make up something like Eric did, a giant ball of tin foil.
That would be really dangerous if it was that big.
I understand it. So, but you'll make up these things, which then causes an argument over every single answer. Because I would be like, a giant ball of tinfoil is only dangerous if someone drops on it you off a house. And if you're going to say that, then everything in the world is dangerous.
If it was rolling down a hill.
Yes, but then you just have to move out of the way.
It's still dangerous.
Unless, of course, you're in a movie and you're required to run in a straight line in front of it.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, you will then have these arguments. And you can go online and see us. When Rado came over to our house, we played this game live. And folks, if you want to see it, and you will see the arguments that happen in the game. And we had a good time playing and a good time with those arguments, but I know some people are not going to like that. And you're going to have somebody in your group who will write really ridiculous stuff and then defend it to the end, and it's just like, again. Has a long neck, yellow, giraffe. Well, technically, I once had a toothbrush. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So I like it. It's not super unique, really. It's okay. It's fun, but I think it might fade into obscurity. Even if the box does say, by the makers of Pandemic. It's not really like Pandemic.
Yeah, okay.
That's Knit-Wit, Knitwit.
I was very excited to bring out Pied Piper with the kids. This is number 5 in the Tales and Games series. However,
number 6.
Is it number 6? The reason I don't know what number it is because they took the numbers off. They no longer say what number it is on the spine. Maybe it's somewhere on the inside. Anyway, this is the latest in the Tales and Games series. In Pied Piper, you are trying to have the least number of rats in your house. You've got a house, and it's got maybe something like 7 little gradient spaces on it, and you've got a rat indicator that will move up as rats pass by your house. Then there are a bunch of these adorable little rats, wooden rats with colored tails. And you'll put out one more than the number of players. There's also a Pied Piper standee that goes out in between the houses. And then you've got cards that represent the colors of rats that are in the game, as well as the Pied Piper. 4 of these are drawn, and then you're going to be playing action cards underneath these. So you may have the Pied Piper available, and the yellow rat, and the red rat, and the purple rat out in the center of the table. On my turn, I will place 2 of my action cards, and these action cards may say, move 1 space counterclockwise in the direction of the green arrow. It may say, move 2 spaces in the direction of the green arrow. It may say, go backwards. It may also say, go into the sewers and emerge on the other side of a house. Once I have to play these 2 cards on 2 different rats, or the Pied Piper. I can't play them on the same one. After I've played these 2, if any individual card has 2 action cards underneath it, then it activates. So if the red rat now has 2 action cards, I then move that rat based on the action cards underneath. Anytime a rat passes through a house, the rat indicator goes up 1 space. Anytime the Pied Piper passes through a house, it goes down. That's it. As soon as there are only 2 players left in the game, if you reach the top of your meter, you're out. And if there are only 2 players left in the game, whoever has the lowest rat meter wins the game. There's a couple of extra action cards, too, that just add 1 to the movement, or there's also a melody card, which can move all of the rats and or Pied Piper in 1 space along for the ride. Now, my children teamed up. They colluded to play. They had clustered like 4 rats right next to my house. And the older child tells the younger, if you play a melody card right here, then I will play a movement card and we will knock Daddy out of the game. And the little kid's like, yeah, let's do that. And they did, and I lost. And the older child won, so the younger child hasn't quite picked up on, don't always listen to your brother. But I don't know whether I should feel proud or upset.
I feel like you're coming off bitter, actually. Sure,
bitter. Bitter's good. The game is all right. I'd like to play it with more players. We only played with the 3 players. It seemed too easy to collude. I'd like to play it with 4 players and see if that changes the pattern of the game. Often I would play 2 cards on 2 different rats, and then the next player would simply play on those same 2 rats so that they would activate, rather than spreading out the action cards. I think there's a little more subtlety that could be explored, especially with more players. But it's cute. And the rats are adorable. It's somewhere in the middle of the Tales and Games, though. I don't think it's one that's It's not Heron Tortoise, but it's also not. What was my least favorite of the bunch? I can't even remember. Baba Yaga. It's not that. It's somewhere in the middle of the whole bunch, and that's Pied Piper.
Let's talk about Monstrous.
Okay.
Monstrous is from a company from Australia, and this game has giant monsters. Because you and your fellow players are some of the Greek gods, and you're kind of irritated that the people on Earth are not calling out your name. So you are throwing monsters at them to make them want you more. Because that's what good people do. They say, hey, my kids aren't listening to me, so I'm going to put tax in the room. That will teach them to come to me for help. I don't get it, although it does seem to be the plot of that one movie. What movie was that?
I don't know. Tack monsters?
The men were fighting gods. Oh, they remade it. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. What matters is that this game essentially has you throwing monster cards on a table. You are throwing monster cards on a table, then you see where they land. If they land on top of different cities on the table. If they land on cities, you'll get points for that city. You get points for landing on other monsters. Sometimes if a monster lands on your monster, you kill that monster, and so on and so forth. Okay, interesting idea. Except, it's not really unique, right? We already have Flower Fall, where you're dropping the cards on a table.
Mm-hmm.
But this is even more similar to Maximum Overdrive.
Yep. Oh, hey, Future Eric here. What Tom meant, of course, is not the 1986 film Maximum Overdrive, but the card game Maximum Throwdown.
From AEG, where you are throwing cards down and attacking other people. It's okay, but what's really odd about it is this game uses this amazingly cool monster artwork that doesn't really fit the theme of throwing cards on a table. Throwing cards on a table is a silly thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
This game doesn't come across as silly. As it is, I didn't dislike it because I like throwing cards at a table. But there's nothing new there. I mean, really, there's nothing new other than complications because every card has two sides with a different power on each side. And then it will land on the landing and you'll say, well, how many points did that give me? Oh, it's covered up the number. Well, lift it up. Or look at this big sheet that tells you what all the things do. That part was a little annoying. I just didn't find it differentiating enough to the artwork's amazing. Other than that, though, I can't really say, hey, you should get this one when there are other games like this out there. But if you really want to throw Greek monsters at a table, Monstrous is the game for you.
I got to play an older game from Winsome Games this past weekend. It's called Northern Pacific. And if you didn't know any better, you'd think this was a print-and-play prototype. But they actually charged money.
I did know better, Eric, because you said Winsome.
Yes. There is a segment of gamers that are very excited about Winsome Games and their production. And
less than 200 in the world.
Which
Eric is apparently one of them.
May have been the print run for this. So Northern Pacific is it's a train game. And you have a map that I forget where they start. There's one train line that is working its way towards Seattle. And it may start in Chicago or something. And so you've got these branching paths. Many of them are one-way paths. And then there's a bunch of, cities along the way. And you have two choices on your turn. You can either put one of your cubes, and you start out with like 6 of your cubes in front of you, and then the rest are in a sort of shares stack. You can place one of your cubes on one of the cities, or you can move the train. And if you get the train to hit one of the cities that has your cube in it, not only do you get that cube back, but you also get another one from the supply. So you've just doubled your investment. However, if the train moves past a cube that you've put out on the board, that goes back into the supply. You've lost that investment. So you have to invest in order to score cubes, but once you've laid a cube out there, your opponents can guide the train away from those cubes. Of course, you may also entice another player to go to the same city you're in, and you may only get to put 2 cubes in each city, maybe 3 based on the number of players. So do you help the person that you are teaming up with? Do you move the train away from the other 3 players in the game? That timing is the whole game, really. And once you reach Seattle, whoever has the most cubes wins the game. If I found it enjoyable, but laughably ridiculous as far as the production values go. But mechanically, it was interesting. It was quick, certainly played fast. We played a couple of rounds in, maybe 20 minutes. And it was a good time. So if you don't mind what looks like a print-and-play game, Northern Pacific could be something to check out.
So like we were talking about in the last episode, apparently Eric is digging in the bottom of that bucket.
No, I wanted to mention it.
Speaking of older games, I played a game at MeepleCon called Pecunia non-olet. I think that's how it's pronounced.
Sure.
It's okay, I don't think that's how it's pronounced, but this game only came out in Germany. And I remember very distinctly when it did come out, because I saw it in the Spielbox magazine, and I was like, what? Because it shows a Roman guy from ancient Roman times sitting on a toilet.
Okay.
In this game, you run a public toilet. People will queue for your toilet. They will then come in. You will put a number of brown tokens on them to show how long they will be in there. Each turn, you will remove some of these brown tokens as their time in there diminishes.
Okay.
Once they're finished, you get the money printed on them and you go on. So you're queuing people up, dropping them in. There's some rules like senators will not sit next to slaves. There's a bunch of take that cards. You draw one every turn, so you can play them, change cards and queues around. It's kind of like guillotine a little bit. If you play this game, which you may not, because again, it never came out in English. I can't imagine why. The subtitle of the game, translated, says, "Gold does not stink." So anyhow, if you play this, there is some tactical things you can do, but it's mostly a take that game. And I cannot imagine anybody playing this game without a plethora of poop jokes.
Yeah, this sounds like a game my kids would love.
Well, I think adults probably enjoyed it more because trying to come up with a different euphemism for someone going to the bathroom got very lengthy in our game. I now know about 70 different ways to say it. Knowledge which I'm sure will come in handy somewhere. It's obvious it was never printed in English, but it was a unique experience. I just saw this guy had a bunch of older games, and I was like, ooh, I've always wanted to play that game. Okay, I've played it. I've checked that off my list. My bucket list is smaller than Eric's. It has like 30 games on it.
There you go.
And they're older games, and that was one of them, which I didn't even know was on the list until I saw it, and I was like, oh, yeah. Ooh, that's a funny theme. Game's not that good. Okay, let's move on.
Check that off.
So I believe it's called Pecunia non-olet. I know I'm mispronouncing that, folks. I apologize, whatever. It's not worth your time looking it up anyway.
There you go.
Hey, Eric. We have lots of people on this show. Why are we still talking?
I don't know. Let's get to a new contributor.
Yo, how's it going? Derek Davis here from the What Did You Play This Week podcast. Welcome to the Solo Game Corner, a place where introverted gamers come for a social recharge. In this segment, I'm going to talk about the games that I love to play to recharge my energy for more social board gaming endeavors. This week, I thought I'd introduce myself and talk about why solo games are so important to me and my engagement in this wonderful hobby. See, in my profession, we're required to go through a full psychological profile. Part of that profile is the MBTI personality test. During my interviews, it was disclosed that I am part of the less than 1% of society who answers 100% as an introvert with no inclination whatsoever to extroversion. The team informed me of the dangers and emphasized the need to set good boundaries and practices to prevent burnout. They encouraged me to have a set of things that I could do alone to recharge after a demanding day of social interactions. Let me explain how this intersects with gaming. I started to become deeply interested in board gaming in late 2012, but I couldn't bring myself to seek out gaming groups. It just seemed like too much. It was during that time of seeking that I wandered upon a Dice Tower video that featured Z Garcia talking up a solo game called Onirim. I bought it immediately and began playing. On my day off, I would wake up and begin to play several games back to back, and each game just demonstrated different possible decisions to make, engaging my mind and recharging my energy. I soon found myself talking about it with my friends and colleagues, and before I knew it, I was buying two-player games like Summoner Wars. I would invite a friend over, play, and then quickly look forward to my solo gaming to recharge the next day. To make a long story short, this pattern continued, and I found that having time to game alone allowed me to engage in social gaming more often with greater fervor. Solo gaming is what allows me to be a full member of this hobby, I think. And in this segment, I hope to share with you the great world of solo gaming and the things within each game I play that engage my mind and energize my spirit. For instance, about 8 months ago, I went out on a limb and I bought Spyfall. This would be my first foray into teaching and facilitating a social deduction game. Gathered 6 of my coworkers at lunch, and we gathered and played for about 4 or 5 rounds. It was hilarious. It was exciting. Frankly, it was exhausting. I found myself thinking about some quiet time at home during my last few hours of work. And when I did finally get home, I had a strong urge to dive headlong into a game of Navajo Wars. Now, Navajo Wars is an extremely heavy and complex solo-only game by Joel Toppin and published by GMT Games. In it, you represent the Navajo people in modern-day New Mexico, facing the various forces that threatened their way of life. What I love about the game are the three options of actions presented to the player. You have to choose whether or not you want to plan, take a number of actions using movement points, or allow for the passage of time with the risk of losing some of your elders. Mastering when each of these options is most beneficial is the key to the game, and the wrong decision at the wrong time can be catastrophic. Suffice it to say, Navajo Wars is a tense, thematically rich game filled with important strategic decision-making. And as I reflected on this, I was struck with how different these two games are. But the solo experience of Navajo Wars was the perfect complement to the silly light fare that is Spyfall. It provided the heavy solo counterweight to energize me for future social gaming situations. So what do you love about solo games? What do you hate? What questions do you have? Let me know. You can find me on Twitter at SoloStoryGamer and on the What Did You Play This Week podcast. Have a great week.
I'm the Broken Meeple, and this is the Starting Tile, where I talk about alternative gateway games that you might not have considered that can be used to introduce new players to our hobby. Hello, Luke Hector here, and the most astute of you will already have noticed that my name has changed. We haven't even got to the end of episode 2, and already I've had to change the name for this segment. Well, it was brought to my attention that apparently the welcome mat has a double meaning when searched for on Google in various urban dictionaries. And because I want to keep this podcast as family-friendly as possible, much like my normal blog and podcast, I decided a name change was required. And funny enough, why don't we use that as the basis for this segment episode and talk about tile placement games? Now, of course, your other person, your friend, your relative, is not saying to you, darling, I want to play a tile placement game. I want to play games where I get to lay out tiles. No, that's not how it works. But with tile placement games, you typically build something in front of you. Now, it could be a map of somewhere, it could be a farm, it could be a cave, it could be all sorts. But generally, you'll start with one tile, and then it will build up and build up and build up until you've got something nice in front of you. And these tend to be games I really enjoy. Well, why don't we start with the blatantly obvious that I've already just mentioned? Carcassonne. You build a map of Carcassonne outwards that comprises of monasteries, cities and roads, etc. But every time you play the game, the map always looks different and it's very colourful. There was a recent reprint lately that made it even look more even nicer in terms of artwork. But if you don't like the whole, fields and roads and that, you could always opt for one of the spin-offs like South Seas or Gold Rush, or even the new Star Wars one's not that bad, depending on what kind of theme they enjoy. It's a classic gateway game, really simple, there's barely any rules to teach, but if you go with the original Carcassonne, once you get the hang of the game, you can expand it out to Lord knows where, and it is a classic to have. A relatively new game you might not have heard of is called Cacao. I think that's how you pronounce it, C-A-C-A-O. It's a tile placement game in which, similar to Carcassonne, you're building out this map, except it's of a tropical jungle this time. But rather than placing meeples on the map, you have this specific deck of tiles yourself that have meeple symbols around the outside. And what you do is that as the jungle builds out with villages and cocoa fields, I'm guessing, and temples, etc., then you place your worker tiles next to them, and depending on how many workers are on them dictates how much you get use out of that tile. And that tile stays on the board, and then you draw up to a hand size of tiles. And the idea is that as this whole tropical jungle paradise builds up, you use your tiles in various ways to try and get the most out of it, victory points, etc. It's a cool little game, and it's relatively new, but I was surprised when I played it, and it's not difficult to learn. It's probably a step up from Carcassonne, but certainly if you think that they can handle something a bit more thicker than Carcassonne in terms of weight, Cacao would actually be a good choice to consider. In case it's just your new girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, whatever that wants to play a game, try out Uzi Rosenberg's Patchwork. In this one, you're trying to build the most aesthetic quilt on a 9x9 personal board. Yeah, I know, that sounds really boring, we're making quilt. But the idea is that the tiles make up the quilt, and they're all in different shapes. They're placed in a ring, and the player takes one of the tiles, depending on where the starting marker is, and places it on their board. And obviously, different shapes and sizes means that you've got to be careful about how you lay it out so that you can fill the space most efficiently. Certain tiles will give you these buttons, which are kind of like the money currency, and you use these in order to buy further tiles. But you can only buy tiles that are up to, I believe, 2 or 3 spaces up along the ring of tiles that I mentioned earlier. So you have to be careful about what you're going to give your opponent when you take your tile, but then also you have to be able to make sure that your tile even fits on the board. Really cool little two-player game, very quick, very easy. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this segment. My name is Luke from the Broken Meeple, and I welcome you to the hobby. The starting tile is laid out, the drinks and snacks are ready, let the games begin.
Every game has a story, and this is one of them. Presenting Biography of a Board Game, with your host, Professor Scott Rogers. This time I want to talk about a game with no board, no dice, and a lot of awards. The abstract strategy game, Qwirkle. Before inventing Qwirkle, Susan McKinley Ross worked for the toy company Hearthsong. When her employers asked for toy and game suggestions, she submitted over 200 ideas. She was immediately promoted to the product design department. While at a game night in 1998, McKinley Ross was watching two friends play Scrabble. She realized what she liked best about the game was making words in two different directions. A few days later, she dreamt of a colorful tile-laying game. She awoke and immediately started creating the prototype. She called this game Abstrackle. Her husband suggested changing the prototype's thin tiles into the chunky domino-like ones found in the final game. A heart-shaped symbol was changed when McKinley Ross realized that the shape should be symmetrical within a square, so they could be easily read in any direction. Qwirkle is an abstract strategy game where players draw and place tiles, each marked with a colorful symbol: circle, square, diamond, clover, starburst, or crisscross. The wooden tiles are placed into rows that are either all one color or all one symbol to score points. When a player completes a row of 6, they score a Qwirkle. Ironically, calling the game's signature play a Qwirkle wasn't added until the second edition of the game. The unforgettable name was created by Mindware, who published the game in 2006. It went on to become the company's top-selling game with over 2 million copies sold around the world. Board Game Geek founder Scott Alden called it the sleeper hit of 2006. The Washington Post listed Qwirkle as one of the best games at Toy Fair 2007, and it won both the Mensa Select Award and the Parents' Choice Gold Award that year. When Qwirkle was finally published in Germany in 2011, it was nominated for and won the Spiel des Jahres Award, the German Game of the Year. McKinley Ross was honored that year with a Taggy, an American award for the Toy and Game Inventor of the Year. These two prestigious awards catapulted Qwirkle into the limelight, where it was featured in many magazines and on the board game show Tabletop. If Qwirkle's abstract symbols aren't your thing, don't worry, you can find several licensed versions available internationally, featuring images of Disney, Simpsons, and Star Wars characters. The strangest of these versions was one published with financial analyst Warren Buffett as one of the symbols. In addition, Qwirkle has had several variations: a travel edition for Qwirkle players on the go, Qwirkle Trio adds scoring boards to further challenge advanced players, Qwirkle Cubes changes the tiles into dice, allowing the players to push their luck and roll new choices. Qwirkle Cards is a rummy-style game where players place cards in sets to create Qwirkles. And there's even a Qwirkle iOS app available. In it, players can change the color of the symbols to anyone they wish, a very useful feature for colorblind players. Qwirkle is a great game for players of all ages, with an elegant design. It's a great example on how games don't need to be complex to be successful. Next time, we'll look at a thrilling family game that has gone by many different names. Survive, also known as Escape from Atlantis. Until next time, this has been Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
And now, a tale of humor. I volunteered to help lead a weekend-long leadership event for teenagers being held at a local university. I have a reputation as the game guy, so a big part of my responsibilities was running icebreaker games and providing some late-night game options. I brought one of my absolute favorite games, the Resistance Avalon. At first, I just got 5 other brave souls to try it. However, that first game went so well that by the third game, I had a full complement of teenagers playing the game, and I was just facilitating. After watching one round, one of the teenagers, let's call him Josh, was excited to play. I passed out the roll cards and asked all of the players to close their eyes. I then asked the minions of Mordred to open their eyes. Josh was a little too enthusiastic, and not only did he open his eyes, but he stood up. In doing so, he pushed his chair back, which made a loud sound across the tile floor, causing several of the teens to open their eyes. I emphasized the importance of being quiet, and we dealt the rolls out again to give it another go. Once again, I asked everyone to close their eyes, and I asked the minions to open theirs. Josh was once again a minion. When he opened his eyes and looked around, he let out an evil-sounding snicker that must have been impossible to keep in. This caused several of the other teens to laugh because they recognized who it was. Instead of restarting, we soldiered on, and the loyal knights got an easy win. We started a new game. I once again emphasized how important it was not to make unneeded noise that might give yourself away. We went through the whole setup. This time Josh was Merlin. He was perfectly silent as he looked around to see who was a minion. I told everyone to open their eyes. As soon as I did, Josh leaned to his right and attempted to whisper to the player next to him. However, this was the loudest whisper that was not really a whisper that I have ever heard. The entire table heard Josh fail horribly at whispering as he said, "I'm Merlin." That was the last game of the Resistance we attempted that evening. Everyone was too busy laughing.
Have you ever run into a person like this, Eric?
Who's just totally not subtle?
Well, we were just at the movie theater today. As of us recording this, we had gone to see Superman vs. Batman, which, quick review, 6 out of 10, meh.
Okay.
Not bad, but wow, a lot of problems. But anyhow, and we sat next to this old couple who decided to sit a seat apart from each other, but to still talk to each other. And I don't believe they know what whispering is.
Yes.
My dad used to not have any kind of whispering voice either. Do you need to go to the bathroom? Dad, you can whisper that. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, I always find that funny. There's always that's why I really try my hardest on a personal level when I'm playing one of these games to think in my head, sing a song, do anything I can, because I don't want to be influenced by noise. I hate that whole, I heard noise on that side of the table.
Yeah.
I want to be completely in the game based on the players how they act, not, I heard someone's tap the table or whatever.
Right.
Although I guess in the case of this person, in Josh's case, that's not possible.
Yeah, it wouldn't have helped.
Eric, are you a cheater?
No. What have you heard?
Well, Jeff did not say that.
3, 2, 1, go.
It's time for GameTek with Jeff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
A few years back on GameTek, I talked about cheating, what the causes are, and how we detect it. A study was recently published that looks at cheating from a different angle. Performed at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in February, this study examines the role of self-image and priming on cheating. Now, the setup is fairly simple. The participants first played a game against one other participant, the outcome of which was almost completely random, although it did require some player choice and focus to make the players more invested. People were then told if they were winners or losers, and were told to play another game, again against another person. Now, this time they were competing for a share of a monetary prize. And the game was very simple. Players rolled 2 dice under a cup, peeked, and then self-reported what they rolled. They then got a share of the prize pool based on the number that they claimed to have rolled versus what their opponent claimed. Now, they set it up this way so that people realize that their cheating would specifically harm another participant and not the experimenter. Past experiments have shown that people are more sensitive about harming the other participants. Now, all participants were told that whether they were telling the truth about their roll or not would not be checked, and that the experimenters would never know what they actually rolled, and that was true. They set it up so it was easy for people to tell that they couldn't be checked. Now, what the experimenters were looking at was the average reported value for all the participants in a group. Now, obviously, the average should be very close to 7, since they were rolling 2 dice. Anything far outside this would indicate that the group as a whole was cheating. Okay, so once again, the setup. Half the people are told that they had won the first game and were winners. Second group was told that they had lost the first game and were losers. Would either group cheat? Would one cheat more than the other? What do you think? Well, the results were pretty clear. The winner group reported that they rolled on average just under a 9, 8.75 actually. The loser group reported an average of 7. which is what you would expect. Now, in addition, a control group was used, which did not play the first random game. They just played the dice rolling game. And this group also reported an average of basically 7. So why would winners report a higher average? Why would winners cheat more? Don't they already have a positive self-image? The experimenters conducted another experiment to try to tease this out. This time they did not do the first game, which divided the players up into winners and losers. Instead, half the group was asked to tell the experimenter about a time they won a competition. The other half was asked to talk about a time they achieved a goal. Then the same dice under a cup game was played. The outcome here was very similar. Those who had talked about winning a competition reported an average roll of close to 9, just like the winner group. 8.89 this time. The achievement group had an average of 7. Again, a difference of almost 2 on average. The difference the experimenters point to here is that competition is specifically directed against other people. You are trying to beat other people. Achieving a goal is more often about yourself and meeting goals without regards to other people. And this experiment indicates that bringing in social dynamics and all of the complexity that jockeying for position entails means that people are more likely to cheat. The first experiment with the winners and losers also offers tantalizing glimpses at the concepts of entitlement and privilege. The people were told that they were winners, and they were more likely to cheat. Was that because they wanted to do what was necessary to maintain that title and the self-image of being a winner? Or was it because they felt that being a winner made them somehow better than their opponent, and so the rules didn't apply equally to them? This experiment does not say, and due to the nature of the way it was performed, they couldn't specifically tell which players cheated, and so did no post-experiment interviews or anything else to try to figure out motivation. But regardless, it certainly opens up a whole series of interesting questions that other investigators hopefully will explore. And this is an opportunity for all of us to be more self-aware about behaviors that we may subconsciously be subject to, and double-check that we are acting with honesty and fairness. This is Jeff Engelstein with GameTek.
Welcome to Cult of the Old, where I discuss games we may have forgotten about, or games that failed miserably but still had some good mechanics in them.
He's Brian Counter, and everything he does is counterproductive.
This week, wanted to do one just for fun on Card Sharks. Designed by someone in the Witness Protection Program in 2002, rated 6.29, and not enough ratings to be ranked. I feel like I'm treading on the Bandstastic world of Flip the Table because I got this at a Goodwill, but this is based on the TV show of the same name, which I started watching in elementary school in the late 70s. Jim Perry hosted, and this game can be described in 4 words. Census trivia high-low. Contestants were asked questions of people polled who were often of similar demographics. 100 firefighters, 100 housewives. Yes, this was done during the 1970s and it's a little misogynistic at times. Of how many people would do X, where X might be, here's an actual question, of 100 people in general, how many would rip out an article or pictures from magazines in their doctor's office? I might have said 33, but obviously I have too much faith in humanity I can be naive because the real answer was 44. But when the first contestant answers with a number, the other player either says higher or lower. The person who is correct gets a shot at the cards. Each contestant has a row of 5 larger-than-life cards, and they have to get to the end to win the game. So the first card is flipped. Let's say it's a 2. They just have to call the next one higher or lower. That's it. So obviously if you flipped a 2, you say higher and you go on to the next card. If you're feeling lucky, say you got a king, you might go lower on the next one, etc., etc. The first player to get all 5 cards correct wins. If a player pulls up an 8 or something, they can do what's called a freeze and they move on to the next question, and then they can't lose any cards before the freeze point. Because if you make the wrong call, you have to start from the beginning or the last freeze point. Now in the TV show, I think they'd get 4 questions and then they'd go to sudden death, and the 2 contestants would play a best 2 out of 3, and then the winner would go into a bonus round, which is a solo play, big tree of cards. They start off with a little money and go high-low until they either busted or won a lot of money. So that's the TV show, which I enjoyed as a kid. How does the board game compare? Pretty well, I would say. Note that the components are pretty minimalistic, though. You have 2 different decks of cards, you have 2 boards, one for the 5 cards across and one for the fast money, and a booklet of almost 500 questions, garnering the out of 100 people how many blah blah blah. And it actually works pretty well for what it intends to do. Keep in mind, some of these questions are dated, but it can be fun. Now this is not a brain burner, obviously. This is more of a game for if you threw Flip the Table in a secret room with the party game cast and force them to hang out for weeks on end, this is what they might come up with and play. The game has one obvious weakness. This is a 3-player game. You have a player on each side and the host. However, you can get around that and its complete lack of availability out there by being a little creative. You might hold a party game kind of thing, and if you have 13 or more people, you can poll 10 people live, take down their answers, and return to the other room, perhaps maybe an adult beverage or two, and that's it. Having some fun with that could work. You could use whatever creative means you want, standard trivia questions or something goofy, to come up with who gets to play the cards.
And now, let us rejoice with a tale of romance. Killer Bunnies and the Quest for the Magic Carrot. This is not a game. It's barely an activity. I will shank myself in the thigh with a spork before I play this again. Playing cards that won't have an effect until 2 turns in the future, claiming as many carrots as possible and still not winning because of how random the win condition works, and listening to people trying to explain that yes, it is possible to develop a strategy in this game. I should shank that guy while I still have the spork. I think the biggest insult I have ever received was when a friend said, "I think you would enjoy Killer Bunnies. It seems like the type of game you would like." But I owe all the happiness in my life to this game. In college, I asked a girl on a date. She turned me down. I tried again. She turned me down again. I was giving up on her and moving on when a friend of a friend invited both of us to their Killer Bunnies group. I knew who this person was from high school, but didn't know her personally. The girl I intended to date was her coworker. Every Thursday they all gathered around a large table to play this greatest misuse of the Earth's natural resources, and had been doing so for years. I constantly made excuses, or signed up for extra shifts delivering pizzas on Thursday nights so I didn't sound like I was blowing my friends off every week. But then, I heard this girl I had asked out was coming. So I went, hoping for a third time to be the charm. The first night both of us were there, she left with another guy that she had been set up with on a date, and I said, "Oh well, I guess it wasn't meant to be," and headed home. I don't remember how, but for some reason I had committed to come for another week. As much as I hate this travel-sized torture chamber in a blue box, I am a man of my word, so I went again. I played. I did not enjoy myself, but I sat next to this girl and we were able to have a decent conversation, without it being weird that she had shut me down twice. She kept coming, and I kept going as well. After a few weeks of this, I summoned the courage to put myself out there for a final time. All or nothing. If I got cold-shouldered again, I would officially be done, and, while I hoped to remain on good speaking terms, would move on from this potential relationship. I asked her out, and she said yes. We went on a few dates, and regularly went back to Killer Bunnies night as our basic connection. She seemed to like it, and it was another way to spend time in her company, so I was there every week. I really liked her, the apparent like of this wretched stealer of hours notwithstanding. Eventually, a table was set up to the side of the main event with a jigsaw puzzle on it, and I decided to take a break from the inanity of retrieving the vitamin A-rich MacGuffin and recompose this piece of one of our local landmarks. She joined me at the table and we chatted. Eventually, I spilled the beans that I didn't actually like Killer Bunnies. She mentioned that she didn't like it either, and it was hard to follow, but she came to play every week because she thought I liked it. I told her I was only there for her because I thought she was enjoying it. It was incredibly liberating. Thursday nights were no longer Killer Bunnies nights, but instead our regular date night. Occasionally we stopped in on the group to catch up with friends, but we never again played the game. This summer will be our 6th anniversary. We have 2 beautiful children, and a third on the way. Aww.
See? There's good things about Killer Bunnies. I've always said so. This is actually something I've always been curious about, like how many people have met through gaming. Because, it's happened. I've met couples before. I'm pretty sure Cody Jones...
I think so.
...met his wife through Gen Con, or through gaming at least.
Yeah. Well, I was just telling you, just recorded a narration in the style of One Night Ultimate Werewolf for a couple that's getting married. In fact, by the time this airs, I think they will have been married. And they wanted me to sort of record their ceremony.
Congratulations.
Yes.
A jubilation. All right, cool. Well, that's good. I'd love to hear more stories like that. As you guys can tell, I'm a sucker for stories of all types. But before we get to our next story, let's find out what's in the box.
What's in the box?
My name's Ian.
And I'm Nikki from the Player 2 Cards podcast.
Stripping back game components from an experienced
and a newbie gamer's perspective.
The box. What would a game be without a box? A mass of bips and bobs thrown into a bag causing confusion and grief to a gaming night. The box is what binds it all together and gets us all initially excited to play. It's the first thing we see sat in a shop display, the art drawing us close, tempted us by the treats it offers inside. The cover of the box has to be inviting, giving an initial idea of what the game is about, be it a dungeon or a spaceship. It alone can be the difference between buy and sell. This to me isn't the most important part, however. This belongs to the side of the box. The box in most people's houses usually sits stacked on top or side by side other boxes. All we see on a day-to-day basis is a side, so this has to stand out for me. A good quality spine makes a display far more interesting. The back of the box also has to work. Its job is to show the contents for a game for sales purposes, but I also like it to show how the game will be laid out, plus an exciting piece of text to draw you in. As the box is opened for the first time, the sound it makes as it slides down onto the table. Shpuk. A sound that says it's game time. The smell of the game, especially a new one. The smell of newly printed cardboard or cut wood brings back so many gaming memories. It's only then when you see what the box holds, the gaming goodness it brings forth. It's then you can pull out all those pieces and see how the box looks. What dividers has it got? How will it protect all my cards? These are all important parts. After playing, you want to be able to pack everything away as it went in, ensuring the lid slides happily down, ready to play another day. Nikki.
I like a good box design. It's almost like a book though, of course. The old saying is never pick a book by its cover, but it is helpful to get a good visual effect. Games like Munchkin Castle Panic version take an already established design and build on it. Dungeons & Dragons harks back to the good old established fantasy designs. Others, like Super Dungeon Explorer, take a drawing style, in this case chibi cute Japanese drawings, cute, sassy and worth it just for the models on their own, which I have to say worked for me, hence I bought the game. I'm also a sucker for a tin. Forbidden Desert and Sushi Go are great tins. I especially like boxes that waste no space. Nothing worse than getting a large box only to have a lot of empty room with spaces in. Nope, and to be honest I prefer a smaller box. At the end of the day we have to store these blighters.
Tales of Amazement. At a recent family event, we had an opportunity to play Formula D on the street racing map. I was playing with two of my brothers, my 7-year-old son, my 14-year-old daughter, my 8-year-old niece, and my mother, who we will refer to as Grandma. We lined up at the starting line in reverse order of experience with the game. My son, at pole position, started us off as the 1s and 2s of first gear were thrown around the table. I began at the back of the line. Much fun was had as the pack went through the many turns, the debris field, the street of unhappy neighbors, and the speed trap. My son fell off the pace. My daughter and niece were staying in the front. I worked my way up from the back of the pack into the middle and striking range. And in the lead, Grandma? I snuck through the narrowing penultimate turn in 4th gear and pulled into 2nd place. Grandma then hit the last turn in 5th gear and burned tires to stay on the inside turn and a space beyond. I entered 5th gear, the final turn, and burned out tires to edge around the corner and got the one additional space that I needed to ensure I rolled before her on the next turn. My niece, then my daughter, also were able to get around Grandma. My son joined the pack in the last turn as well, but as I was first to hit that most forward section of the track, I would be the first to roll next turn. With nothing but a long straightaway between myself and the finish line, I picked up the large 30-sided 6th gear die and rolled. 21. The minimum that can be rolled in 6th gear. 21. I was 3 spaces shy of the finish line. My niece, with a sly smile on her face, went into 6th gear and rolled the die as we cheered her on. 21. We all laughed as my daughter took her turn, ready for victory, and got 21. So then Grandma picked up the large blue die with a chuckle, rolled it to try and retake the lead, but 21. She moved her car down the track, getting in the pack that was now speeding to the end. My 7-year-old son quietly looked at the board as he picked up the die, saying, "If I roll a 30, I win." We all watched as the die hit the table and clearly showed 30. "Yes!" he yelled as he jumped in his chair. We all laughed and cheered him on as he moved his car down the track to cross the finish line for the win. His smile and joy of that moment will be forever etched in my mind. Huzzah!
I love stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's, because you could see that moment. Because this happens when we're playing pitch car. It seems like every time I play pitch car, there's like a couple kids playing. And everyone like roots for them to do really well. And you're like, oh, I hope they do well. And when they don't, you feel bad for them. But when they do great, you're like, yeah! And it's just a great come from behind moment. So, all right. Well, let's talk more about feelings.
Feeling.
Hi everyone, this is Glenn Flaherty from the Sweet Spot, and today we're going to talk about getting into dungeon crawlers. Now, there's many different levels. You can try it if you don't have one. You can get into the super rich games, the medium, some really light ones, and then I'm going to mention a few that you really got to avoid. So start with the heavy ones. Of course, we all know about Descent. That game gets a lot of praise, and it is all deserved. It is a very engrossing game. You can put a lot of players into it. It takes probably, 2 hours to play. That's probably a great place to start. And of course, if you like Star Wars, the same game is designed as Imperial Assault. But I would actually recommend over all of those Space Hulk. That game is fantastic. It's pretty much a dungeon crawler because you're trying to survive, except you're going through corridors, but it has the same effect to me. But the level of peril in that game is so engrossing. Space Hulk. Coming down from there, but in that same universe, you can try Death Angel. It's a card game. It's about half an hour long, and that actually gives me the same feeling as playing Legendary Encounters Aliens. You're trying to survive, and even though you hardly ever do, when you get further and further and you get to those last cards, it is such a wonderful feeling. You feel good even when you don't win that game. Okay, there are some other ones too. You can get Drakon. That's kind of like you're laying tiles. It's a crawler. It's like 40 minutes. It's okay. There is Cave Troll. That's an area control game. That's about 45 minutes. I think that's a really cool game, and I think that's by Fantasy Flight. I have a fun time whenever I play that. If you're going to go down a notch from there in terms of complexity, you can try Munchkin. Okay, that's a very engaging game. That's like an hour long. That's okay. But I would suggest if that kind of feel is what you're looking for, go with Arcadia Quest. I actually think that's a really cool game. It's a little bit more expensive game, but it'll have the temperament that would appeal probably to the same crowd that Munchkin would. Okay, and if you go down from there in terms of time, you can get Dungeon Roll. That game really grew on me. You roll dice, you're trying to make it, you're trying to survive some dragons, and you're getting treasures and stuff like this. And I was disappointed initially because I thought it was going to be a two-player game, like a true two-player game. And it really isn't. You're kind of making decisions together, or you're telling the other person to roll as the bad guy. But once I switched my paradigm that the game is really about getting as far as you can, then it was a lot of fun. There's another version of that called Dungeon of Fortune. That's okay, but stick with Dungeon Roll. And 2 games you gotta avoid. Welcome to the Dungeon. I don't even know if that's a game. That is just a box of boredom. Falls flat every time we play. You really have no control over what anyone does and how it affects you. You can't really modify anything. It's just a time killer. And there's actually a really good game called Dungeon Twister card game, but how you interact with it will drive you insane. Because it's cards, and the cards flip, and there's like 100 characters, and you have to orient the characters a certain way, and then they all have symbols, and you might not remember what the symbols mean, because every single character has their own powers, and then you gotta track where in a room you are, but where you're orienting your card, and what powers and items you have, and that thing will drive you nuts. Okay, so there you go. Again, that would be Descent, Imperial Assault, Space Hulk, all good. Death Angel, I love that game. Dracone, Cave Troll, down from there, Munchkin, Arcadia Quest, Dungeon Roll, I think it's like a $15 game, so that's really good. Dungeon of Fortune is okay, and avoid Welcome to the Dungeon and Dungeon Twister card game. Thanks, folks. Talk to you soon.
Let's explore the psychology of board gaming with Dr. Alonso.
Hello, and welcome to the Psychology of Board Gaming segment of the Dice Tower podcast. This is Dr. Alonso, and I would like to present to you a core concept of therapy and how it relates to board gaming. When therapists are in training, they're presented with a concept called the self of the therapist. Research regarding the effectiveness of therapy has indicated that up to half of the successful outcomes of therapy directly relate to how the therapist uses themselves as an agent of change. When we consider the founders in my field of marriage and family therapy, we find personalities who created powerful, change-evoking experiences for their clients. It has been said that simply being in their presence demanded change. What is interesting is that by giving themselves permission to be themselves, they contributed to their profession, and the concept of the self of the therapist is now a central aspect to all forms of mental health therapy. How can we apply this to our hobby of board gaming? I would propose that we explore a concept I would like to call the self of the gamer. It is impossible for us to not bring who we are to the gaming table. When we sit down to play a game, we bring a culmination of all of our life experiences from birth to that very moment in our life. We bring our personality, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, relationships, perspectives, and our very identity. These are the things which make us unique. The game itself defines the parameters, theme, rules, and frames the bounds of the anticipated experience. Yet it's the uniqueness of each individual which brings the game to life. So much of what we enjoy about board gaming is directly related to what the game brings out of us, and the kind of interpersonal experience we have with others. Think about the last time you played with your friends, family, or fellow gamers at your local game store. While the aspects of a single game remain largely unchanged from one play session to the next, the experience in which we have can vary significantly based on the makeup of the players involved. While this may seem obvious at first, I would propose that the variation of experience is based on the concept of the self of the gamer. Think about who you are and what you bring to your gaming sessions with others. Consider those things which make up who you are. Maybe you're excellent at reading, comprehending, understanding, and implementing rules, allowing for other players to focus on relaxing and enjoying the decisions they're making throughout the game. Maybe you bring a sense of humor, which increases fun and lightheartedness. The next time you sit down to play a game, I would like to invite you to consider your own self of the gamer and what you're actually bringing to the table. If you realize how much you contribute to the gaming experience, how much permission would you give yourself to fully participate and bring all of who you are to the gaming session?
It's time for the Dice Tower's Question of the Week, sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., in which our team of gaming experts answers one of your questions, thus increasing the odds that someone will get it right. This week's question: what game suffers the most from power creep? And what game deals with it the best?
Hey everyone, it's Mark Zielinski, and one of the things I hate most is power creep. However, it was in two of my favorite games, who I think are the biggest offenders, and that's Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k by Games Workshop. Horrible. Every time a new army book came out, that was the most powerful one to buy models. Blah. So, one of the reasons I don't play 40k anymore. And which one handles it the best? Yeah, I know, you're tired of hearing about ASL, but every time a module comes out, that module, all the scenarios in it have been play tested and everything else. So when a new army or something comes out, there is no power creep. Everything is honed and tested, and all those scenarios that you play usually have a 50-50 or 60-40 balance at the worst for each one. So that's one that every time a module comes out, I don't worry about anything being overpowered.
Hey everyone, Luke from The Broken Maple here. With this, it's not really a game that suffers from power creep, it's a genre, and that's pretty much anything with the word collectible in front of it. CCGs are the worst for power creep, where you start off with, oh, these are really cool cards, and then suddenly something comes out in a future expansion that's super rare, and it completely breaks the system. I think LCGs have managed to get this under control to a great extent, particularly Netrunner. Netrunner Tier 1 decks, as in the big tournament decks, are still using cards from the original core set that are still fantastic to this day, and even in the first few early packs, they're still going very strong. So, I think the LCG format has gotten rid of most of the power creep that CCGs started off.
I don't think many people participated in this because they didn't understand what power creep was.
I don't understand how people don't understand what power creep is. I guess you have to play CCGs?
I guess. I mean, I understand. My answer was probably going to be Magic, but also they seem to have done a pretty nice job of it in the whole cycling system, that, you know, certain cards get banned or cycled out so that
it took them years to get
know
to that
it's
point.
going to work.
For a while, there was a list of banned cards. Now they're much better. See, the problem is with the banned cards is that you can work as hard as you want on a game, but when you're selling it to millions of people, they're going to find some combo you could not have anticipated.
Right.
And that happens with a lot of games. But what happens with games is, especially games that have more cards and more factions, power creep is a possibility because you want people to buy the newest set. So you'll make the stuff in that set a little bit better than everything else.
Right.
Collectible card games are most notably, you know, they have a problem with this.
Right. You don't want to have a card. It's possible that a newer card can do what an older card does with no change in benefit, you know, or is better, clearly better than the previous version of the card, without having a detriment to it. And so it literally replaces the earlier card, and you don't want that.
Right. Now, Fantasy Flight has LCGs, which could have the same problem. I haven't heard much about it. It's been accused of different companies at some points, but like, they had this faction. You know, any game where there's factions, like Hiroshima Hex or whatever, people could accuse and say, well, this new faction is better than the rest. I think the company that handles it the best is a Plaid Hat with Summoner Wars. They do a
lot of testing with those factions.
And it seems like the factions are all very balanced. But it's tough because you want people to buy that new faction. Oh, they're really exciting. But they're not. They're still the same as that first faction.
Right. You have to differentiate them in play style and technique and, you know, interesting mechanisms rather than just being stronger, more powerful than another faction.
Power creep can ruin a game. Overpower, which was a very fun game I enjoyed. And I just had a chance to teach it and play it with somebody the other day. But I liked Overpower. And they came out with different sets. They came out with the DC comic set, in which the characters were notably not powered. Like, Superman would lose to almost anybody in the Marvel Universe. Then they came out with an Image set from Image Comics, which was extremely overpowered. And so they just had this back and forth thing. It was kind of lame in that regard. Star Wars had overpowered cards and power creep, and they would just keep dealing with it, the Star Wars collectible card game, by introducing a new card that says, this card cancels such and such a card. And I was like, that's not a very good way to handle that either. Power creep is not something that's a really big deal in the board gaming world, but it is something that does exist. And it is something that can happen, and so I just thought it would be an interesting question. Obviously, I'm the only person who's really interested in it. Although,
Wasn't there... So, Heroescape had a Marvel set. And wasn't there an issue where lots of people don't like playing with the Marvel characters at all? And they want to sort of keep them away from tournaments?
There was some people don't do it because of theming, which makes no sense to me. They're very powerful. They're way more powerful than anything in Heroescape, but at the same time, they cost way more than anything else in Heroescape.
Right.
So I think they balance out. I am not a professional Heroescape player, so I'm sure someone could prove me wrong. I know they're not allowed in most tournaments and such. It was one set, but yes, it was definitely like, oh, I remember distinctly playing a game against Melody where she had the Hulk and Abomination, and I had like 60 figures. And she won.
Wow.
But they were the same number of points. But yeah. Mark mentioned Warhammer. They're definitely the worst. And they, I think, in the past, they've done it deliberately.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
They made stuff better so that you would have to go out and buy it. Alrighty. Well, folks, that's it for another episode. What's next for us? Well, I'll be at the Gathering of Friends in a week or so.
Cool.
So maybe I'll have a chance to see some early releases that Essen releases. I do not know. I'll have some information for you guys when I get back.
Say hi to Alan Moon for me.
And yeah, I will do so. And there's a game he's designing which I'm really excited to talk about. And I will.
Okay.
As soon as I can.
As soon as you're allowed to.
Woot. But anyhow, until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode, number 452, was recorded on March 25th, 2016. Coming up next week, it's our top 10 political games. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has turned your game upside down, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom and me with assistance from Jason Thompson, Itai Perez, Eric Matthews, and Rob Searing. Wrinkle removal for Tom's old horse provided by X-Colt Press. Timothy Pigham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at CoolStuffInc.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network, including The Broken Meeple, Flip the Table, On Board Games, The Game Pit, The Party Game Cast, Board Games Insider, and Board Game University. Find out more at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. Does it just kill you to go to the gathering and not be able to talk about the stuff you play?
Usually I don't talk about the stuff that I can't... I won't even play it. If I'm like, I can't talk about that, I'm not interested in that game then. Which is a lie.
It's like, I need to talk.
No.
I talk about games.
That's my job. You're taking money out of my kids' mouths.